And I'm focusing this right on. Oh, wrong one! I put it on the wrong eye. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I'm LJ if you're new to my channel. So today's video is a makeup dupes video. So today's video is done in partnership with Luisa. They reached out to me and said they wanted to send me some of their jewelry pieces for me to try on, and I was like, absolutely. I love jewelry and actually have some of their jewelry pieces on right now. I have these pearl earrings and this heart necklace, and they also sent me these gold earrings as well. And I went for these because I do love pearl earrings. I feel like anything with gold just looks better on my skin than silver, so I went with these gold pearl earrings and this necklace. So they have 14K solid gold. So like this earring right here has 14K solid gold. The golds are plated brass and they have sterling silver. They have sustainable diamonds. All their pieces are very sustainable, so I've been rocking them for a couple weeks now. They do have fair prices for the quality that you do get. Rather than outsourcing to places with bad working conditions, they do plate them. So I chose these three pieces because I feel like these pieces really complement me. I feel like they're so me. So I love pearl earrings, so I went with these pearl earrings. These pearl earrings are called the Hope earrings. I've been wearing the earrings and I haven't really had any reaction. My ears haven't swollen up. These earrings are actually hyperallergenic, which made me actually be very interested in trying them out because I was like, they're probably not going to damage my skin. So I really love these pearl earrings. You guys are going to be seeing me wearing this quite often. They're super simple, very vintage. And I also chose this necklace. This is the Lev Necklace. It's also plated with 14K gold on brass, and it also is tarnish free and hyperallergenic. I love this piece because I've always wanted to have like a heart necklace. I love how the neck piece is very thin, so it's not too thick. It doesn't look like too blingy. It's just very simple and cute. So this piece is called the cruise piece. The materials on this specific piece is gold on sterling silver. It is a lifetime warranty, so it's not going to fade. So if you want to check out their designs, I will leave the link down below in the description box, so you can use my code LJ10 to get 10% off any of these jewelry pieces. Alright, so today's video is going to be a makeup dupes video. So I do dupes videos for specific things like lipsticks, but this time I did a full face of makeup dupes. So on this half of my face, I'm going to be applying products that are more on the mid-range slash high-end side, and then on this side I'm going to be using drugstore and affordable products. Not all these products you can get them from the drugstore, but they're definitely affordable products, and most of them are dupes for the other brands. Yeah, that's what I'll be doing in this video. So if you're interested, keep on watching, but if you've not subscribed, go ahead and join the LJ family by subscribing, and also hit the bell so you're always notified of a new upload. So without further ado, let's get into the video.
KLJ, welcome to a channel where it's poppin'. Welcome to a YouTube.
So I'm gonna start off with primers. So basically in the video, this half of my face, I'm gonna be using the expensive products, and then this half of my face, I'm gonna be using its dupes. So like the affordable products. These are not like expensive products. I'm not like using like luxury makeup brands. I'm just showing you guys a bunch of dupes that I've discovered that I feel like are alternatives for certain products. I'm gonna start off with primer. So for primer on this half of my face, I'm using the Fenty Beauty Soft Silk Primer, and then a dupe for this primer is the ColourPop Pretty Fresh Primer. So this one is the Hyaluronic Hydrating Primer. I feel like these are dupes because they're both hydrating and they're both like silky. So then I'm gonna go ahead and apply the ColourPop one. And with this ColourPop one, you have to make sure to shake it really well. Alright, so both primers are on, and for me, I feel like they feel the same, like the texture is basically the same. Alright, so moving on to foundation. So I'm going to use the Fenty Hydrating Foundation on this side, and then a dupe for that is the ColourPop Pretty Fresh Hydrating Foundation. These are both hydrating. This foundation for Fenty is in the shade 440, and then the Pretty Fresh foundation is in the shade Deep Dark 190 Warm. So I'm going to start off with one pump for the Fenty because I usually use like 1.5, 2 pumps. So I'm going to start off with one pump only because I'm doing half, and I'm going to blend that out with my e.l.f. sponge. So the Fenty foundation is about like $32 if I'm not mistaken. The ColourPop foundation is $16, so it's half the price of the Fenty foundation. And this Fenty foundation is like a really good match for my skin right now. All right, so now I'm gonna apply the Pretty Fresh foundation. So I'm also going in with one pump, but I feel like this one kind of gave off a lot. So let's see how it looks. So the ColourPop foundation seems to have like way more coverage than the Fenty one. The Fenty one looks very natural. I've never actually compared these products like side by side. This is like my first time comparing the products side by side. But just based on me using them a couple of times, I find like some similarities with like the finish. But looking at it side by side, it's really helpful because it's going to determine whether these products are really similar and whether they're dupes. For this foundation, I did feel like it was a dupe, but it seems now when I look at it, it seems like the Fenty foundation is more natural and it's closer to my skin than this. All right, so skin is looking dewy, so we're gonna move on to concealer. So for this side, I'm gonna use the Tarte Shape Tape Concealer. This concealer is very, very popular because of like the coverage and just the finish of the concealer. So I'm gonna be comparing it to the e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer. I feel like these are both almost the same. I'm not sure if the Tarte Shape Tape is a hydrating concealer, but this Camo Concealer by e.l.f. is a hydrating concealer. So I'm gonna apply the Tarte first. This is in the shade Deep. And then on this side, I'm gonna go ahead and apply the e.l.f. I feel like the e.l.f. is a little bit darker, so I'm going to mix it with a different shade. So the e.l.f. one is in the shade Deep Cinnamon. I'm gonna go in with the shade Deep Olive just to add a little bit to the e.l.f. one to make it just a tad bit lighter, so when I mix it up, it all looks like one color. So I'm gonna start off blending the Tarte Shape Tape with a clean beauty sponge. And I like the concealer getting a little bit tacky before blending it out, so I just let it sit for about 1 minute. And that's the blend of the concealer. I don't like to completely blend out my concealer, so I'm gonna blend out the e.l.f. side with another clean sponge. And I think this e.l.f. one has a little bit more coverage, just like a tad bit more coverage than the Tarte Shape Tape. So it seems like these drugstore products, they really coming up with coverage. Like, what? I actually thought the drugstore side was going to be more like watery, like washed out, because I feel like, you know, maybe they like add too much water, they don't put enough like product. But it seems like the ColourPop foundation and the Camo Concealer both have more coverage than the Fenty and the Tarte. Alright, so moving on to contour. So for contour, I don't have like dupes. I wouldn't say they're similar. I did want to include contour. So for contour, I'm gonna use the Hourglass Vanish Concealer in the shade Anise on this side, and then the e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer. This one's the shade Rich Ebony. So I'm gonna use these two. And I'm gonna place a small amount because these contours are crazy. So I'm blending this out with a brush. I don't like my contour drying because it gets hard to actually blend it out. So I'm gonna do one at a time. So I'm going in with that sponge that I used for the concealer underneath my cheekbones to sharpen it up. All right, so for this side, I'm gonna use the e.l.f. Camo Concealer. If I remember, I think this contour is like really, really dark. So this will be darker than the Vanish one, just the shade. So I'm going back in with the concealer sponge and cleaning up that contour. So I'm gonna place this concealer on my forehead as well. Alright, so now I'm going to move on to setting powder. So for setting powder, I feel like it's pretty obvious. I've been talking about these two setting powders for a long time now. For setting powder, I'm going to use the Anastasia on this side and the black Opal on this other side. The Anastasia is in the shade Deep Peach and this black Opal is in the shade 03 Medium. So I finally get to try like a side-by-side comparison of these two products. I've been thinking they're dupes for a while now and I'm actually getting a chance to test it out. So I'm going to use the same sponge that I used for the Tarte to apply the setting powder. So I'm picking it up with the damp beauty sponge. Alright, so now I'm going to use the black Opal. So both these setting powders are actually oil controlling setting powders. That's the reason why I feel like they're so similar. As far as the shade, I'm not really 100% sure, but they control the amounts of oils that build up on your skin. So I'm also using the same sponge that I used for the e.l.f. concealer to apply the setting powder. And I like using a damp beauty sponge because I feel like it kind of gives you enough coverage for setting without baking. Okay, these are dupes for sure. As far as the color, yeah, these are definitely dupes. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and set my forehead, 5 head, 6 head, 7 head. I got a big forehead. Then I'm gonna use the Anastasia powder, and I'm also gonna set my forehead. And using my Morphe E2 brush, I'm just going to dust the powder. Okay, so time to move on to the eyebrows. So for eyebrows, on this side, I'm gonna use the Anastasia Dip Brow Pomade in the shade Ebony. So this is one of my favorite products. And then on this side, I'm gonna use the NYX eyebrow gel in the shade Espresso. So this one has always been like my go-to for a long time, but I've just been really liking this Anastasia one, but I feel like they're very similar. So I'm gonna go ahead and sculpt my eyebrows, but I'm gonna do this off camera just because I feel like I sculpt my eyebrows a little better when I'm focusing. But I do have an eyebrow tutorial if you're interested in checking that out. So I'm gonna quickly do my eyebrows and then come back to finish off the rest of my face. Okay, so the eyebrows are sculpted. So I'm gonna move on to eyeshadows. So I'm going to prime my eyelids with the same base. So I'm using Paint Pot by MAC. I'm doing this just so that I can see if the eyeshadow palette are dupes. I don't want to use two different eyeshadow bases because that's not going to be accurate as far as like the eyeshadow palette. So I have two eyeshadow palettes I'm going to be using. So for this side, I'm going to be using the Artist Couture Supreme Nudes eyeshadow palette. I've used this palette a couple of times on my channel. I've done soft glam makeup looks. I found a dupe for this palette, and when I saw it in reality, I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually a dupe for it. So I got this palette by C Color Cosmetics. So this is the Lust in Paradise eyeshadow palette. It's a much bigger eyeshadow palette, but it has almost the same shades as the Artist Couture eyeshadow palette. So you can see the greens, the browns, and then the shimmers right there. They look pretty much the same. So the Artist Couture palette goes for $40, and this C Color Lust in Paradise palette goes for $9, so significantly cheaper than the Artist Couture palette. So I'm gonna do one eye each just so that you guys can see like the eyeshadows. So the first shade I'm picking up is this shade right here called Nudist, and I'm placing this shade right on the crease to set it so it does not crease. It's also going to add a little bit of warmth on my eyelid. And the dupe for that would be this shade right here. So this palette doesn't have names, so I just have to kind of like point it out. So I'm going to use that shade and place it on the same area I placed the Artist Couture one. Alright, so next shadow I'm gonna pick up is the shade Transcend on the Artist Couture palette. So I'm focusing this right on the crease area. Alright, so for this palette, I'm going to pick up this shade right here, which is very similar to that shade Transcend. Alright, next shade I'm picking up is this shade, brown shade called Aesthetic. This is just like a warm tone brown shade. I'm using this to warm up my crease area a little bit more, but I'm also spreading this on the upper portion of my eyelid, so towards my eyebrows. Alright, so for the C Color palette, the shade that I'm going to pick up is this right here. So it seems like this shade is a little bit lighter. Alright, so far so good. As far as the formula, like both of them are blending really good. So I'm gonna go in with the Artist Couture palette. I'm gonna pick up this shade right here called Mink, and I'm going to smoke this shadow out on the outer portion. I'm bringing this towards the inner portion, but as I'm bringing it towards the inner portion, I'm closing it out just a little bit, and I'm going to drag that out all the way. All right, so I'm gonna do the same thing for this eye, but I'm gonna use this shade right here for the C Color palette. Alright, so I'm going to cut my crease. I'm going to use the NYX Professional Pigment Primer Base. Alright, so the shade I'm going to pick up on the C Color palette is this green shade. And I'm going to place that on my eyelid. I'm just placing this all over my eyelid and dragging it out to close it in. Alright, so for the Artist Couture palette, I'm gonna pick up this shade right here called Supreme. I knew this shade was gonna be darker than the C Color palette. Alright, so this is what the eyeshadow palette's looking like. So quite different with that green shade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to top this shade right here with this shade right here called Lavish, just to kind of give it a lighter look. I feel like this shade from the C Color palette is just a mixture of the shade Lavish and Supreme from the Artist Couture palette. So I'm going to go back in with the shade Mink, and I'm going to mix it with the shade Aesthetic from the Artist Couture palette. Alright, so I just went ahead and added powder right underneath my eyes because I was getting quite a bit of fallout from both palettes. Right now, I'm going to apply the inner corner shade. So for the Artist Couture palette, I'm going to grab this shade right here called Opulence. So a dupe for that one on this C Color palette, I feel like is this shade right here. Alright guys, so I went ahead and popped some lashes on and put on some eyeliner. So I'm going to complete the eye makeup look. For my bottom eyes, I'm going to go in with these two shades and smudge that right at the bottom. And for this eye, I'm going to mix these two shades right here. Alright, so now that we're done with the eyes, so I'm going to go ahead and complete the rest of my face. So for bronzer, I'm going to use the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush bronzer. And then on this side, I'm going to use the Makeup Revolution. This is the Splendor Ultra Matte Bronzer. I feel like these two are very similar as far as like packaging, how they look like. This Charlotte Tilbury bronzer is $55 and the Makeup Revolution Glow Splendor bronzer is $12. So there's a major price difference. So I'm gonna start off with the Charlotte Tilbury bronzer. Then I'm gonna go in with the Revolution Pro bronzer with a different brush. And these bronzers are like super duper pigmented, so they do have a lot of fallout. Alright, so for blush, I have two blush palettes here. So for this side, I'm going to use the Ace Beauté. This is the Blushed in Paradise palette. This palette is really bomb, super pigmented, has a lot of blush shades that can work for my skin. So I'm going to use this blush right here. And a dupe for this blush is the e.l.f. Cosmetics blush palette. Now, the reason why this blush is looking like this, the blush palette fell down and the mirror just came off. I just dropped it. I would definitely say this is a dupe for this blush palette right here. The colors are very, very similar. So I'm going to pick up this shade on the Ace Beauté palette. And then for the e.l.f. palette, I'm going to grab this shade right here. So the e.l.f. palette is a little bit less pigmented. I think it's a little bit more powdery than pigmented, but it still looks really, really nice. Alright, so for highlighter for this side, I'm going to use the Cover FX. This is the Monochromatic Bronzer Duo. And a dupe for this will be the Focalura. This is the Sun-Kissed Monochromatic Blush Duo. So these two palettes are honestly very, very similar, especially with like the packaging and the shades, how they look like. Like they're blush duos, they're both monochromatic. So the Cover FX Monochromatic Bronzer Duo goes for $38 and this one goes for $10. So there's a significant difference. I'm going to use the highlighter on these blush duos. Using a fan brush, I'm going to pick up this highlighter over here. So for this side, I'm going to use this highlighter. I'm using a highlighter brush, but it's not a fan brush. I only have one fan brush. I'm going to use this to apply the highlighter. This is actually really, really nice. Like, it's actually quite pigmented. This looks a little bit more highlighting than this one. This one looks more like a bronzer. So I'm gonna set my skin with the MAC Charged Water. And a dupe for this is the NYX Bear With Me. This is the Cannabis Sativa Seed Oil. The only thing about the MAC Charged Water, I think it has a little bit of that glowy finish. And this one doesn't really have that, but I feel like they're very, very similar. Alright, so while I let that dry, I'm going to move on to the lips. So for lips, I'm going to use Chestnut by MAC, which is one of my favorite lip liners. And a dupe for this is really the NYX lip liner in the shade Espresso. Alright, so for my lips, I'm going to use the Fenty Slip Shine Sheer Shiny Lipstick. This one is in the shade Cookies and Cocoa. And a good dupe for that will be the Revlon Glass Shine Lipstick. This is in the shade Nude Illuminator. I did a video where I was doing like swatches of all the shades that I think were dupes for the Fenty Slip Shine Sheer Shiny Lipsticks. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the Fenty one. And then I'm gonna go ahead and apply the Revlon. These have become like my go-to lipsticks. Like, I love them. They're definitely dupes of each other, and this Revlon one goes for $10 while the Slip Shine Sheer Shiny lipstick goes for $22. So that is it for this video. So of course what I'm gonna do is fix my hair, and then I'll be back with the final look and let you guys know what products I think are dupes. So I'm gonna go ahead, fix my hair, and I'll be right back. Alright guys, so this is it for this makeup look. I would say a lot of these products are dupes for the high-end / mid-range makeup products. The only thing I would say is the eyeshadow palette are not like exact dupes, but if you're interested in the shades in the Supreme Nudes palette by Artist Couture, I do feel like that C color palette was very similar to the Supreme Nudes palette. It's just that green eyeshadow was a little bit lighter on the C color palette than the Supreme Nudes palette, but generally all the other eyeshadows were really the same. That dark brown shade I feel like was a little bit more warmer than the dark brown in the Supreme Nudes palette. The eyeshadow shades are a little bit different, but if you were looking to get the Supreme Nudes palette and you didn't want to pay $40 for that small palette, you can get the big palette by C Color, and the shades are pretty much almost similar. They're not the exact same. As far as the primer, foundation, concealer, the setting powder, blush, bronzer, and highlighter, I feel like all those products are definitely dupes. Right now my makeup looks standard, it looks the same. It doesn't look like I have anything different on. So if you're looking to buy some affordable products but you didn't want to spend your coins on those expensive products, then you can definitely get some and get this whole look. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Shout out to Ana Luisa for sponsoring this video. Thumbs up this video if you liked the video or you thought the video was helpful, and also subscribe, join the LJ family, hit the bell so you're always notified of a new upload. But other than that, I will see you guys in my next video.
KLJ, welcome to a channel where it's poppin'. You better subscribe, got it on lock, yeah. Got it on lock, yeah. We need more likes, more views, yeah. You can leave a comment too. Welcome to our YouTube. Welcome to our YouTube.